Alright, hello there. So today is another kind of quiet, rainy day, so I thought it would be a good day for a video. It's been a while since the last one, but I just wanted to show a quick game in the French defense that I played recently. A 5-0, meaning 5 minutes, 0 seconds incremented. So you get no more time, 5 minutes is all you get. Game from the black side, and I want to show some of the real strengths of the French defense in this video. One of the ideas of the French defense is you create somewhat of a passive or very reactionary structure rather than a proactive structure. However, the tables can turn very quickly, and you'll see in this game that the player with the white pieces overextended greatly and was punished for it later. So we start with e4, e6, d4, best move, and now d5. So this is the starting point of the French defense, and white can play the close variation or the exchange variation, also known as the open variation, or they can play the move in the game was knight to d2. So what this move seeks to do is occupy the e4 square with a knight. So if we imagine that position, now white is pretty comfortable. White can continue with regular developing moves and castle, and this knight is not easy to deal with, and this bishop, black still stands with a bad bishop. So, but I was pretty pretty well versed in this line, so I like to play knight f6 anyways. Now I'm actually threatening this pawn. I'm actually ready to take this pawn with knight or pawn. So they almost always push. In this situation, if white captures, this is a mistake, because now the knight looks ridiculous and it's blocking the white bishop on c1, whereas black is going to continue, and it's very easy. So they push, and now, okay, knight g8. So this move, my opponent spent about a minute thinking after this move. I love to play this move. It's not the best move. The computer recommends knight d7 for c5, pawn advance, and then you continue in the French style. But I love this move because the knight did its job here. Now it has a job to do here. The knight from its eventual spot on e7 is going to be very, very powerful. Whereas white has made another silly knight move, so both sides have made one silly knight move, and the white knight is not doing anything. So here we go, f4. Here comes the attack. So this is the kind of teasing, tantalizing thing about the French defense is if we flip the board, actually, let's see if I can do that. So look at black's play. Knight back. It's so passive. Doesn't it feel like with such a weak passive structure that white can go smash through black's defenses? It kind of does feel like that. And what white aims to do is to just blast through black's kingside with the moves f4, g4, h4, eventual f5, and knight f3, and then coordinate some pieces over here. So white's whole game plan is going to be to smash through on this side of the board, the king side. But it's not going to be very easy, and white can actually lose his way in the process of this. Meanwhile, black's plan of c5 is still very easy and very strong. It's a very strong plan for black and will allow a lot of counterplay with eventual moves like rook c8 and bishop takes c5, things like this. So this knight move, it's just a little cheeky, it's a cheeky move. It's not the best move, but it's a personal favorite of mine, especially in a lower time control. So knight g8, f4, here we go. Now my knight's silly on g8, we have to get it in the game. Knight to e7. Now we have three things stopping f5. So white is not playing f5 anytime soon. Here f5 would just lose a pawn, and this would be big advantage to black. So now this is a bit of a prophylaxis move. White knows black's plan is a c5 and then c takes d4. So he's ready to recapture there. However, this is still the best move for black because black needs to develop his pieces. And actually, in a recent lesson of mine, we talked about this move here, knight c6, before this c5 push. And this is actually can be problematic for black because what is this knight doing? This knight's not really doing much, and white can just ignore this entire side of the board, and white can get on with their attack on this side of the board. This knight isn't causing any threats or problems for white. So when we preface it with c5, the move in the game, and then put the knight behind the pawn, that's actually a lot of pressure. And once this capture is made, the b4 square will be available. If you can see that, once the pawns trade each other, the b4 square for the knight becomes available. So you really want to, this relationship with the pawn and knight. Notice how white is doing the same thing. The knight doesn't want to go in front of the pawn before it's moved, unless it's on the king side. That's a bit out of the scope of this video, but I just wanted to talk about how black has to expand first, even at the cost of this pawn, and only then put the knight behind the pawn. So white knows his knight is silly and moves it. I did what I said I would do. Developing. G3 from white. This looks to be a very weak move. White's whole thing is raw, scary, attacking. We got knights coming in, we got all these pieces coming in, and then a move like g3. I was a little bit afraid of a move like g4 straight away. Had white done this, white can then put a knight behind the pawn, like we just talked about, and really start coming on the king side. But g3 is a bit mousy. If you're going to play like this, you need to really mean it. So here we go. Rook c8, as mentioned. This file is going to open one day, sooner or later. Somebody's going to take somebody, and I want to have a rook there when that day comes. Bishop here, preparing f5, I suppose, but I still have 1, 2, 3 defenders on f5. This move I really liked because I really don't want him to play f5. If he plays f5, I have a lot of problems. His bishop comes in, his knight comes to f4, where the pawn is. I don't want that to happen, so g6 pretty much stops this forever, for the foreseeable future. I do weaken the dark squares near my king, but if I play bishop g7 and castle, I shouldn't have any problems on the dark squares. Anyways. So bishop to e3. Now he is really threatening this pawn, so I need to take now. Take, knight takes, and this knight did its job. Now I want to challenge white in the center. Castles, takes, and bishop c5. So you'll notice that what has just happened in the last 15 moves or so, or 15, I'm sorry, it is move 15, the last 5 moves or so, is white had all this tension on the king side, like he wanted. And then he just stopped playing on the king side and starts to address this tension. So white realizes that the French defense is actually coming to get him. And if he doesn't react somehow, he's going to get got by this tension in the center. Black is more prepared here to open the center and the queen side than white is. White's not even castled. White's not ready for that. So white has to kind of make some concessions here. And we end up trading all these pieces. Now there's a lot of tension on the diagonal towards white's king. And why is that? It's because he played this move f4. Without this move, basically white can ignore everything and just play. But now the king comes into question. More trades. Now I castle. Gotta get the rooks on the file. This bishop is a bad bishop. It's my worst piece. This is a pretty good bishop. It can live here and observe all of these different places. So I want to put my bishop here and trade for this one, because my bishop sucks. These pawns are on the wrong color for my bishop to be useful. So I want to trade bishops as soon as humanly possible. That's why a6. Rook whatever, and then trade bishops. Okay. So he knows that. He doesn't want to trade. So now he kind of ducked away from the spotlight, but he gave me back my square, c4. So I want to double rooks here. Put a queen behind that and shove down this file. You'll notice how white has no attack on black's king. But all of this stuff I was trying to do is actually happening. Okay, so rook c3, so he knows what I'm doing, and he wants to do the same thing. Double, I double, and he doesn't double rooks. So this is an important moment. I think here, probably, white should have doubled rooks. And then we'll trade some pieces, and I'm left with this bad bishop. That's what I thought he could get away with doing, but instead, bishop back to f1, which facilitates what I wanted to do even more. I wanted to trade bishops off because this is my bad bishop, and this is a good bishop. Now, when I make this capture, the bishops look at each other already, so he's actually helping me out with what I wanted to do. Furthermore, this keeps one rook on the board for each side. However, my rook is looking at his backward pawn, and his rook is looking at nothing. So I thought this was a mistake on his part. I did what I wanted to do. I traded the bad bishops away. Check, and now I get in here. The queen here is so annoying. It controls this stuff. It attacks this pawn. Two attackers on this pawn. This is just a really, really well-positioned queen. It's active and it's protected. This queen is not active, and it's not really going to get active anytime soon. So he has to defend his pawn, and now I have this robust looking structure. You'll notice how here's the difference. His forward pawn post is here. If you could move this pawn away and put the queen here, that would be a good move. But the way these pawns are, the white pieces can't occupy or enter black's camp at all. I still think that white should be checkmating me. He just stopped around move 10 and has not started again. And you'll see later that the king safety comes into question. a3, now I attack that, he defends that, and now I have two really good piece outposts, whereas he's stuck defending his pawns. If he's not careful, I'm going to sneak in here, so he needs to be really careful here. King comes out, and here we go, h5, stopping, kind of slowing any ideas he has over here. Okay, h4 closing, and I just improved my king a little. King comes back, a5 for b4, we're going to explode the position. He knows I'm going to do it. I love this. So he knows, basically king comes here to defend the pawn further, so the rook is liberated. This move is very obvious. He knows that when I go a5, I intend b4, defended by all this. And then I get to start doing stuff with my superior piece placement. He goes here, with two attackers on my pawn. I'm only defending that once. It's kind of the point of no return. And I play the move anyways. So immediately there are some things to notice here. If he does nothing, b takes c3 is game over. That's winning the queen. If he goes queen takes, he loses this queen. And if he goes with a move like either pawn takes, then he has to calculate my pawn takes, other moves. There's always a check here, possible. He could lose this pawn later. For example, if we take this way, takes, and we take here, this is a passed pawn, but now my pieces can start to angle their way in. I can blockade the passed pawn, and the game goes on, but this is a weak point for white, whereas black has no weak points. So just an example of what might happen here. He did take, I took, and in this position, he moved the rook back to defend, which allows me to create a passed pawn if I wanted to. But I thought if I made the passed pawn, he would just go back. And what am I doing about this? This is awkward now. So I didn't like this. I thought it was a trap. So I captured with check. If queen takes, again, rook takes queen is good for black. So rook takes, and we traded. So here, let's pause and just take inventory. So both sides have 5 pawns and king and queen. It looks dead even, and it should be dead even. But he played f4 earlier. He played g3. He played h4. He played all these moves, and now there's not going to be any shelter for the white king, especially with the queen on the board. If these were rooks, players would shake hands. That's a draw. There's literally no way to make progress if these are rooks, but these are not rooks. So check, check, here, threatening to come in and then get behind. Also, what is white's only way to get counterplay? Infiltrate with the queen. That's the only way white can get counterplay. This move prevents the queen from doing anything because he has to keep an eye on his pawn. One more reason that I did all this b4 stuff earlier, because when the pawn was here, if we go back, when the pawn was here, I couldn't do anything to d4. But now, just a few short moves after the fact, he's babysitting d4. So one more thing to keep in mind. Alright, king defends d4, check, and then not a check. So here's one of the things. In these queen positions, it's like, if you keep checking them, it's very obvious what they should do. They should get out of check. You're basically making them move. You're taking the thinking away, making the hard part easy. But when you don't play a check, it's not so easy to know what to do, because you have all these choices now, and you have to wonder, what is this move doing? This is the best move, and a really annoying move. The threats consist of queen here check, queen takes pawn check, queen here check, and the white queen can never go too far, because I'm just going to mop all this up, and when I take this pawn, I'll be defending my f7 pawn, like that. So for example, queen attacks the pawn, check. Well, let's play a better move. And then here, and I'm defended. So white has literally nothing that they can do, and these pawns are just free. It's over. So the queen infiltration is very dangerous. So he stops this check, but allows this one, and then I just take that pawn too. King comes back, check. Alright, we got a passed pawn, let's move it. So he wants to trade queens, but if I do this, how am I defending my pawn? I'm not going to be able to defend the pawn. So this is bad, we don't do that. Don't trade queens. When the queens are... Basically, when you're thinking about whether you should trade queens, whichever king is safer wants the queens on the board. Whichever king is in more danger wants to trade the queens. Because if you have no queens, your king can do a lot of powerful stuff. But if you do have queens, your king is a target and it needs to cower back. You'll notice my king is cowering back where it belongs because this queen is going to cause problems. But his king is completely vulnerable because he moved all his pawns earlier, which is, again, one of the reasons French defense is so tricky, because you push all your pawns, and then later you're losing the endgame, and you don't know what happened. Well, you pushed all your pawns, and I took them all. So, queen here. Keep the queens on. Threaten moves like check here, more infiltration, continue with the pawn. Alright, king comes up, king comes up. So, in the endgame, bring up your king. Check. So here, what I realized is this check is actually good now, because if he takes it and I take it, this pawn is very fast. This pawn is very, very fast. So, just an example of what might happen. I can bring my king up, and he's going to actually have some trouble if I have two pawns. So he takes and I take, but he has to babysit this pawn, and in the meantime I go eat his pawns. So what that might look like is, let's say, this move. You'll see that white's just not fast enough, and the game's over. So let's go back. I just wanted to show that he can't take the queen, but in the game he did. So this is what happened. All these moves happened. Here, this move is forced. He must take. This isn't what I showed just now, but this is the same idea. So the pawn is too fast. He takes it, and now his king is totally shouldered off. The king is cut off. There's no... It's 3 pawns to 3 pawns, but what I've done here is I sacrificed this pawn. I sacrificed this one first, and this one next, to get this king. This king is totally shielded off the board. He cannot come in. Nothing works for white here, so it's all over. So I just take all the pawns, make a queen, and here's where white resigned the game. So I just want to show why that all happens, the dangers of the French defense. It all started with this move, knight to g8. So run away like I was so scared. But actually this move is kind of a trap for white. White throws his pawns up at me, especially this kind of weird g3 pawn move. He makes all these forward pawn moves, and then his king has no shelter later, and it's no wonder. So some more stuff happens, trade all the pieces, boring, 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 boring. Trade the rooks, and then bam. Look at these outpost squares. One more strength of the French defense is the outpost squares you can get on the c-file. And the king is just too exposed for a queen and rook endgame. It's just too open. It's too accessible for the black pieces to give check. So b4, this b4, this was tricky. The point was twofold, is to further open up the king, peel open around the king, and also to weaken d4 specifically. So there's a general meaning of this, which is to weaken the king, and there's a specific calculated meaning as well. So I was really proud of this b4 pawn move, even though it loses a pawn. Take, take, and he didn't take the pawn here. He could have taken, but he didn't. So okay, we trade, check, 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 and then here, this queen e1, very annoying. My king is just sitting pretty, and his king is just at the mercy of my queen. So this is bad. This is a losing position, and I just proceeded to take all his pawns because they were too far forward. Here, in this position, if he could play the move f2, f4 backwards, that would be a good move because it would actually be defended by the queen. But he can't do that. Unfortunately, these pawns are weak, and they should not be advanced, but they are. So then I took them all and made a queen, and he resigned. So that was the video for today. I really want to. I can't overemphasize how good the French defense can be if you understand the point of it. The point is to slowly but surely bait your opponent forward, and then they overextend, and then you can swallow their position from the sides, or from you can basically swallow any overextended pieces they give you, be that pawns, knights, or other stuff. This game was fairly boring in terms of the trades, and we traded a lot of pieces. Nobody got checkmated, it just ended kind of quietly. But the real gem for me was this knight up, knight back. And then I think white went wrong here with the bishop f1. I think there was no reason to do this. White needs to get on with their development and contest this c-file, but they didn't. These outpost squares were great for black's pieces. It's not over yet, but it's not good for white. And then I think this h4, this move here, really just seals the deal, because the white king will never find shelter. There's no way to find shelter here. And b4, this was probably the big turning point, because this just really tells white, hey, your king's going to be in check for 40 moves straight. I'm in control of the game. And after b4, white resigned like 10 moves later. Check, check, and there's just no shelter. You can't hide from the queen. The queen is such a powerful piece on the open board, and that really went to show its power in this position. Again, either of these moves, if they weren't made, this would be tenable. This would be a draw. But white just is so without shelter, and the king is so cold in the middle with no cover. And here's where this is pretty much all we need to see. So I hope you learned something. Good luck in your French defense next time you try it. I hope you do try it. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.